Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 40 of Buha's Block. We have a lot to talk about today. A lot has happened this morning. LeBron James plans to sign a 2-year deal worth $104 million with a player option on year 2 and a no trade clause. The Lakers finally hired 2 assistant coaches for JJ Redick's staff in Nate McMillan and Scott Brooks, and rookies Dalton Knecht and Bronny James officially signed contracts after being introduced on Tuesday. So a lot to cover in today's episode, including what LeBron signing for the 2-year max means, how the Lakers can finagle under the second apron, a little bit on the assistant coaches, Lakers trades. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. All right, so LeBron agreed to a 1+1, which if you had been following our reporting at The Athletic, that was the way that this was trending after the Lakers lost to the Denver Nuggets. We reported that LeBron intended on playing 2 to 3 more years in the NBA, but most likely 2 more years. And this would be in line with that. It also obviously holds the Lakers' feet to the fire to some extent, as LeBron can opt out next summer and potentially sign with another team if he is not happy with the Lakers roster, if he's not happy with the Lakers situation. So it is a page out of his playbook in Cleveland where he signed 1+1s and what was operating year to year and holding Cleveland's feet to the fire at that point. So it seems like he is back to that approach now in Los Angeles, as he is clearly not thrilled with the current roster. The Lakers have not made any moves of note. Their only 2 additions so far have been drafting Dalton Knecht at number 17 and drafting Bronny James at number 55. They also obviously just re-signed LeBron and re-signed Max Christie to that 4-year, $32 million deal. But as of right now, the Lakers have swapped out Taurean Prince and Spencer Dinwiddie and replace them with Dalton Knecht and Bronny James. And depending on how good Dalton Knecht is, that could be a positive swap. But it's tough to say the Lakers are a better team than they were at the end of last season. In theory, the potential upgrade from Darvin Ham to JJ Redick makes them a better team. And in theory, the continuity of bringing back a lot of the same roster and rotation would also lead to some internal improvement. But looking at the rest of the West and seeing the number 1 seed, OKC, adding Isaiah Hartenstein and Alex Caruso, and then the New Orleans Pelicans, a team the Lakers were directly battling for in terms of playoff seeding and positioning. They just added DeJounte Murray. Minnesota added the number 8 pick in Rob Dillingham. Memphis is coming in healthier. Houston is on the rise. Dallas added Klay Thompson. Like, the West is loading up and getting younger and more athletic and just better. And certainly there are teams that have taken a step back. Denver losing KCP is a big blow to that starting lineup and to their depth and just to that team overall. The Clippers losing Paul George is a huge blow to them as well. And Golden State losing Klay Thompson and Chris Paul is a sizable loss for them. So those 3 teams project to be worse next season. The Lakers project to be similar. I think they're going to be slightly better. Again, it's going to depend on the health of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They only missed 17 combined games last year, and they were still an 8 seed in the regular season and then played their way into the 7th seed in the play-in tournament. So there is a potential ceiling there where the Lakers have been a play-in-esque team over the last couple of seasons. Now, I would counter with, we've covered this multiple times, but if Rui Hachimura is starting earlier in the season, if he and Jared Vanderbilt are playing more with the starters, and if the Lakers just prioritize the continuity, prioritize playing their best players, I don't think they go through that December lull. And I think there's a chance that they are battling the Clippers and the Mavericks for like that 4 or 5 seed, and maybe they're the team that goes on a conference finals run or a finals run. So the slide, there were some sliding doors moments last season for the Lakers, and I think coming in with JJ Redick and the way he's already talked about the team and how he plans on using various players, I think has all been positive. So the Lakers, I think, are headed in a better direction just from the coaching swap and again, the continuity with this group. However, to bring this full circle, that is not how LeBron James and Anthony Davis view this situation. They both want the Lakers to make significant upgrades to this roster, and up to this point, that has not happened. So LeBron was tired of waiting. And after the Lakers went 0 for 3 with his 3 reported targets for that non-taxpayer mid-level exception, and we're potentially looking to go 0 for 4, as I reported this morning, the Miami Heat are currently slight favorites to land DeMar DeRozan. I think LeBron just got tired of waiting and decided, I'm just going to sign this 2-year, $104 million deal. The Lakers aren't going to be able to land a notable player for that non-taxpayer mid-level exception, and I'm tired of waiting. So LeBron agrees to the contract, and it remains to be seen if he's going to take a slight pay cut, as the Lakers project currently to be about $1.1 million over that second apron, which is significant. The second apron is not where you want to be. It really does not make sense unless you are a team like Boston, where you have 5 high-level guys that could all be all-stars, that all deserve to be making 30 plus million. You just won a championship. A lot of those guys are still in their 20s, and you are building something that could turn into a multi-year championship window. So for a team like Boston, it makes sense to go over the second apron because it's worth it. For a team like the Lakers, and for most teams, it does not make sense to go over that second apron. So the Lakers are going to need to shed $1.1 million to get under that second apron, and that could come in the form of a trade or from LeBron James taking a slight pay cut, again, in this case, a $1.1 million pay cut, which isn't as drastic as him taking like a $16 to $20 million pay cut to fit a player into that non-taxpayer mid-level exception slot. But as for what this all means, the Lakers are now at 15 players with guaranteed contracts once LeBron James signs. And I've seen people talking about LeBron and the Lakers not being a second apron team until he signs, but it's actually the Lakers aren't a second apron team until Max Christie signs, because Max Christie's cap hold is just over $2 million. And the second he signs, that jumps up to $7+ million, about 7.2 million. So Max Christie is actually the player who is keeping the Lakers under the second apron right now, because LeBron is essentially going to be signing for his cap hold of around 49, just over 49 million. So without Max Christie signing that deal, the Lakers are about $4 million under the second apron. And then once he signs it, they will jump up to about 1 million over the second apron. So the Lakers need to clear that additional salary before Max signs, technically, not LeBron. And that ideally would be by Saturday, July 6th, when players are eligible to sign the deals that they agreed to. Now, as for the other big news of the day, the Lakers hired 2 lead assistants for JJ Redick's new coaching staff in Nate McMillan and Scott Brooks. They come in with a combined 22 years of experience as former NBA players and 43 years of experience as former NBA coaches, including 31 combined years as NBA head coaches. And Brooks, of course, was the head coach of the Oklahoma City Thunder in the early days of the Durant Westbrook-Harden partnership. He also coached the Wizards during the heyday of the Wall and Beal partnership, and then most recently was an assistant for Chauncey Billups in Portland before he was let go this summer. Nate McMillan has coached extensively, coached the Sonics for years, coached the Blazers for years, and then more recently coached the Indiana Pacers and then the Atlanta Hawks. Was fired in February 2023, replaced by Quinn Snyder, and then he has not been coaching since that point. So both guys come in with a lot of experience. Neither coach is the sexiest name, but the Lakers wanted 2 former head coaches on the front of JJ Redick's bench. They wanted 2 guys with considerable experience, and these guys have considerable experience as both players and as assistant and head coaches. And now the key for the Lakers is hiring their director of player development, who will help implement JJ Redick's vision and really build out this program that the Lakers have been touting over the past week or so. But as far as Brooks and McMillan, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think both guys were solid candidates. And in doing some quick intel gathering, I've heard Scott Brooks is one of the nicest guys in the NBA. He will sometimes participate in practices and runs with the guys. He's still in really good shape, and he's a former player. So that's kind of a fun wrinkle. But heard he's a big vibes guy. That's been the intel that I've gotten on Scott Brooks. And Nate McMillan, I've heard, is tough and hard-nosed, and that can sometimes rub some players the wrong way, but he's going to be more of the bad cop, more of the enforcer. Also a really nice guy overall, but in terms of his coaching philosophies can be a bit more stern with players and how he handles them. So he butted heads with Trae Young in Atlanta a bit. That was part of the reason why he was let go. But also the Hawks made that Eastern Conference Finals run under Nate McMillan. So Scott Brooks has made the conference finals 3 different times, including making the NBA Finals once. Nate McMillan has made the conference finals once. If I had to find a critique for Brooks and Nate McMillan, both guys I think are a little bit more old school, a little bit more vanilla with their concepts and their philosophies. So that would be really my only critique, but they do come with a certain level of experience. And from looking at some of the names that were out there and some of the names that had already rejected the Lakers, I think this was about as well as they could have done. And this comes on the heels of the Lakers being rejected by Terry Stotts and Dwayne Casey. It's not a great look that they've had multiple assistants reject them. This is before even mentioning James Borrego, they had wanted as their lead assistant. Sam Cassell, they had wanted as their lead assistant. Jared Dudley, it seems like he's staying put in Dallas. Rajon Rondo, have not gotten clarity on that situation, but that was another name that they had wanted. So several of the guys that they initially wanted and several of the other experienced assistant coaches that they went after, they've not been able to land. And it's just not a great look for the Lakers when they're not landing assistant coaches. They're going after Klay Thompson, offering him more money in years, not being able to get him, not being able to get any of the guys that LeBron has wanted for the non-taxpayer MLE, though James Harden was never going to happen for the non-taxpayer MLE. And Jonas Valanciunas, it appears, had something with Washington in the works very quickly. So I don't even know how realistic that option ever was, but it was really kind of Klay or bust, and the Lakers busted despite coming with a competitive offer. I've heard 40 years, 80 million. That's what Sam Amick at The Athletic reported this morning, but that just was not enticing enough for him. And of course, now the inevitable follow-up question to all of this is what's next for the Lakers? And so to recap, the Lakers, as things stand, are going to have 15 players with guaranteed contracts once Max Christie and LeBron James resign, and they're going to be $1.1 million over the second apron. And there's all these restrictions that come with the second apron in terms of trades and draft picks and signing guys, and just you do not want to be over the second apron. The Lakers have a couple of options here to avoid the second apron. And so option one, which ESPN reported is a possibility, is LeBron James just takes a haircut off of his salary, whatever that $1.1+ million difference is, to keep the Lakers under that second apron and to give them some level of flexibility to improve this roster. And then option two is the Lakers do a salary dump trade, which could come in the form of trading a mid-sized salary like a D'Angelo Russell, a Rui Hachimura, or a Gabe Vincent, plus maybe attaching a JHS, and then maybe attaching a pick, most likely a second round pick or a couple seconds, depending on how much salary is outgoing. And then so they could do that to clear a bunch of space and give them some flexibility under the second apron. And then depending on how much salary that is, they could either clear enough to use that non-taxpayer MLE or more likely just use the taxpayer MLE. The Lakers have preferred to enter the season with 14 players on the roster, which gives them some optionality on the trade market and the free agent market, particularly with buyouts. And one thing with that is the Lakers would need to be trading those guys into cap space, right? I mean, they could technically do some form of like D'Lo plus JHS, or D'Lo plus a minimum guy, or Rui plus a minimum guy, Gabe plus a minimum guy, some combination of a mid-sized salary plus a minimum guy or a mid-sized salary plus JHS, and then take back a player. But any team you are trading with is going to have the cap flexibility to take on additional roster spots, to take on additional money. So it would likely have to be a team with cap space and or a team with some empty roster spots. It gets a little tricky there, especially if the Lakers have a lot of outgoing salary, because at that point, teams are going to ask for more draft capital. So I think the cleanest way, and this is the other path to the Lakers doing a salary dump trade, is just trading a minimum player. And it could be one minimum player, or it could be a couple. And this was something that I was confused about. And I don't remember if I've talked about it on here. I know I wrote it at The Athletic. There's all these confusing new addendums to the CBA. It's really tricky because we need to know it to do our jobs. But there's people that work in the league that don't even know the CBA and get confused by it. So it's just super tricky with all these new rules and restrictions, and certain things are in a certain date range and certain things have like an A, B, C, D, E, F addendum to it. But essentially, the Lakers could do something like, let's say, Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, and a second round pick to a team with cap space or a team that could take on those salary slots and that money. and they don't have to receive anything back. They maybe receive like a heavily protected second round pick or cash or something. The Lakers essentially in that case are salary dumping a couple of minimum guys. What they can't do is combine minimum salaries in a trade of, let's say they're doing D'Lo plus Cam plus Christian for a player or for a couple players. That would not work. That's when the aggregation restrictions with minimum salaries come into play. But if the Lakers just want to dump Cam Reddish or Christian Wood on a team with cap space or a team that could take them on, or dump a couple of those guys and then attach a second or maybe a couple seconds for that team to take them on, that is within the realm of possibility. And if you combine those two guys, making about, I want to say it's a little around $5.5 million, maybe a little bit more than that, all of a sudden you clear that 1.1 million, you get about 4-ish and change under the second apron. LeBron doesn't have to take a pay cut. And now you also open up a couple of roster spots, and the Lakers would need to get back to 14 players on their roster. So they would need to sign someone to either a vet minimum contract or part of that taxpayer MLE, just making sure that they stay under the second apron. So that's another example of the Lakers could trade a couple of those guys, attach a second round pick or something. It's going to require an asset. And then with that newfound flexibility, they could re-sign a Spencer Dinwiddie or sign a different minimum or another taxpayer MLE free agent that keeps them under the second apron, but that they feel addresses a need or a position on the roster. So to cleanly summarize that all up, the Lakers need to shed $1.1 million most likely by Saturday. And that is going to require either LeBron taking a pay cut, or more likely the Lakers will have to do a consolidation trade, which would probably be a minimum player or two to open up a roster spot and open up a little bit of financial flexibility under that second apron. So with LeBron re-signing, with LeBron signing for the max and not taking that pay cut to create the option of signing a player to the non-taxpayer MLE, the only way the Lakers are going to improve this roster is through trades. And that brings us to their trade options. As I've reported on here and on The Athletic, 4 names that have been consistently linked to the Lakers on the trade market have been Jeremy Grant, Kyle Kuzma, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Cam Johnson. And as I recently reported at The Athletic, I've heard that the Lakers have held trade talks with Portland, Brooklyn, and Utah, among other teams, in recent days. So the Portland and Brooklyn talks would align with those players being on the trade market. And at this point, it's a matter of haggling over picks and which players are involved. But that's the latest that I have heard. So again, Grant, Kuzma, Finney-Smith, and Cam Johnson. And so that's where things are right now with the Lakers. There aren't a lot of great options on the trade market, but all 4 of those players are 3-and-D wings in theory with varying degrees of shooting and defense. I think any of the 4 could help the Lakers depending on the price. And I assume that the Nets wings would cost a little bit less than a guy like Jeremy Grant. But it's going to be interesting to see how aggressive the Lakers are in the coming days and weeks. And as I just wrote this morning at The Athletic, it was interesting being at the introductory press conference for Dalton Connect and Bronny James, and the Lakers having this theme in their press conferences over the past week of player development and drafting well and young players and the future of the franchise. And then you contrast that with the present and this team just standing pat, despite, I think, in my opinion, projecting more as either like a low seed playoff team, like a 5 or 6 seed, or potentially even a play-in team as like a 7, 8, or 9 seed. And I think they have a range depending on health and how quickly JJ Redick can implement his system and get everyone on the same page and how good of a coach he is from day one. So I think there's a range there for the Lakers, but getting into that top 4 is going to be tough, I think, as currently constructed. And I've been saying, I think this group, even if they stand pat, could win a round, can maybe even win a couple of rounds and get to the conference finals, but I don't see them going beyond that. And I think in that scenario, a lot would have to break right with health, potentially injuries to opponents along the way, or certain matchups breaking their way where they could dominate with their rim pressure and with their paint dominance and free throw dominance that they've had over the last couple of years. So maybe there is a path there, but I think to decisively enter that upper echelon of the West with the OKCs and Denvers and Minnesotas and Dallases, the Lakers need to make a trade and they need to improve this roster. And again, at this point, signing up a player to the non-taxpayer MLE is unlikely. There's potential to sign someone to the taxpayer MLE, but that's only $5.2 million. So running it back essentially with last year's roster, with a couple of tweaks with Dalton Knecht and Bronny James, JJ Redick could and should be an upgrade over Darvin Ham. And the Lakers have a level of continuity and potential internal improvement, especially if a guy like Max Christie can take a leap off the bench. Gabe Vincent bounces back to his Miami self. Jared Vanderbilt is healthy and looks like the version of him that the Lakers had before he got injured last season. So there are paths for this team to be better than expected. And I currently think they're better than expected. I see the Lakers lumped down with a lot of teams in like the 8, 9, 10 range. And I just don't think that is accurate. I think this team will probably be like a 5 or 6 seed. So I'm higher on them, I think, than the consensus, at least outside of Laker land and with Laker fans. But still, you don't want to just settle for being a 5 or 6 seed and hoping that you get a good matchup in round 1 and hoping that LeBron and AD can punch above their weight in a series and help you upset a higher seeded team. You want to be as high of a seed as possible and have as good of a team as possible. And for the Lakers, this could be a 1-year window with LeBron and AD. It could be a 2-year window with LeBron and AD. But either way, this is a finite window and likely a window that is not longer than a couple years. So it is now or never to go for it and to take a big swing and to go all in and try and win a championship. And again, the present and the future conflict to some extent. If the Lakers end up trading future draft picks, that's going to make the post LeBron era more difficult, and that rebuild or that retooling, reshaping, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be a more difficult process without draft picks. But at the same time, there is no way to improve this roster without making a trade and most likely without using those draft picks. So if they don't upgrade the roster, they are unlikely to seriously compete for a championship. So they have to choose to some extent between the present and the future. It's a difficult thing to balance. And if you ask LeBron and AD what they want, they obviously want to prioritize the present. But we will learn in the coming days and weeks which era the Lakers are ultimately prioritizing. But that will do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. As always, for those on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment and a like. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I've been a bit under the weather, and I almost recorded last night. I'm glad I didn't, because I would have missed out on all this stuff that we had to talk about today. So potentially back on Friday with the second episode. If not, I might go live. It's been a while since I've done a live, so I might just prefer to go live and answer your questions, interact with you. But I'm leaning toward either a mailbag Friday or a live on Friday. So be on the lookout for one of those. But thank you again, and I will talk to you soon.